Hi everybody, I'm Pete Medhurst, soon to be joined by Bill Wagner as we talk about our high school, college, and pro segments for this week, but certainly want to give a segment to the youth football playoffs that are going on right now. Good opening weekend as always, all the teams getting into playoff action, and a lot of the top seeds as always moving on, but now we start to get into the serious games coming up this week. Semifinal action in advance of Championship Day for the American divisions will be at Chesapeake High School on November the 14th. Northeast not available this year because it's being used by the MPSSAA for the state soccer semifinals. So we move right down Mountain Road to Chesapeake High. Also games at North County and Annapolis as well through championship weekend with all of the many divisions. Just to highlight some of the games coming up this week, 12U, everybody's been watching for that Gork Chargers matchup number 3. But before they get there this week, Gork and Brooklyn Park going at it Saturday at Glen Burnie at 4:30, and then the Chargers at Old Mill at 6 o'clock. That game also on the turf at Glen Burnie High School as well. Meanwhile, the D2 champs from last year, they moved up to D1 this year, and they're playing well. Number 1 seed Cape in the 11U taking on Severn. That'll be at Broadneck at 3 p.m. And then Severna Park taking on Gork over at Kinder Park at 3 p.m. on Saturday as well. Also Saturday action in the 80 American bracket featuring Old Mill and Andover. That'll be at Old Mill High School at noon. And then Generals Highway and Severn at 1:30 right there at Old Mill following that game. Over in the varsity U category national side, Crofton and Andover will play at Old Mill 7:30 on Saturday night. Cape and the Bucks at Broadneck at 7:30 on Saturday as well. Sunday action at 1:30 for SRYA and Gork in the 80-pound Central Division. And then Severna Park and Crofton playing at Kinder Park Saturday at 10:30. Just some of the highlighted matchups for all of them. All of the brackets, they are up at aacounty.org, and then go down to the playoff brackets. You can click on the playoff bracket for any one of the weight classes or the age groups. And again, still had some volatile behavior this past week. And a reminder, no dogs. There are no dogs allowed at any stadium turf facility, including Kinder Park, where we're playing at this weekend as well. It's against Anne Arundel County Parks and Recreation and Board of Education policy. We had some people that tried to challenge some of the field monitors on that last week. You cannot bring a dog inside the stadium. That's the rule, period. And please be on your best behavior out there this weekend as well. Should be an exciting weekend, semifinals, as we head toward the finals a week from Saturday. Coming up, Bill and I will talk about this past week's high school menu and preview the big one, Annapolis and Old Mill, coming up this week to conclude the regular season. We're back with more in a moment on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back to the Gridiron Review. Time to talk high schools now, and no surprises last week. Bill, Old Mill and Annapolis did what they had to do, and while both will likely be in the playoffs here, regardless of the result of Friday's game, they're expecting a huge crowd at Annapolis on Friday night for Old Mill and Annapolis, and great to see Annapolis back and relevant as a football power again in Anne Arundel County.
Yep, this is go back 10, 11 years ago, this was always a big game. And it's great to see the job that Nick Good-Malloy's doing. They got a good crop of athletes over there at Annapolis. I have picked Annapolis to pull the upset. I did it partly because in the prediction corner at the Capitol, Bob Hoke is leading me by 1, and I've got to do something different, and everybody else is picking Old Mill. So I figured, hey, I'm going to go with Annapolis. I think this defense that Annapolis has might be the first team all season that's slow down that Old Mill attack, and we've seen Annapolis can put up some points. And I know I'm probably the lone wolf on this, but I think Annapolis has a chance.
Well, with a name like Pete, you know he's good. Pete Boone in that Old Mill running game, and that's the beauty of Old Mill. They're very simplistic. There's nothing. They kind of remind me of Navy a little bit. You pretty much know what they're doing when they come to the line of scrimmage. More than likely, Pete Boone's getting the football. They just run over you, through you, and around you, and that's the beauty of the simplicity of what Old Mill does. Annapolis a winner 48-8 over a Glen Burnie team that had been playing pretty well last week. As you mentioned, Annapolis at one point a streak of 15 quarters without giving up a touchdown.
Yeah,
so I mean that's pretty impressive. Colin Breidenbach for the defense had a defensive touchdown last week for Annapolis, and Cameron Huff 18 carries, 117 yards, and a couple of touchdowns, as it'll be Annapolis and Old Mill coming up.
Playoff implications. Old Mill is currently top seed, but not by much over North Point. And so if Annapolis does upset Old Mill, then you're looking at North Point gets the #1 seed. And I believe if Annapolis loses, you may have a rematch of Annapolis Old Mill in the first week of the playoffs.
It's possible, yes. If Annapolis, if what's helped North Point is there are like 5 teams in Southern Maryland this year with 6 wins or more.
Right.
So North Point's been able to get some bonus points that they haven't gotten the last couple of years. So it's made the race for the top that much more important here for Old Mill if they are going to secure home field advantage. Meanwhile, Chesapeake on the verge of a number 2 seed in the 3A East in its first playoff berth in school history. Wonderful job by Rob Elliott's team. Jason Sutton, 212 yards and 5 touchdowns last week in a 49-19 win at Southern. And, you know, when was the last time we talked about meaningful football for Chesapeake in the month of November? But again, as we've mentioned all along, Rob Elliott got involved with his feeder program with Carl Castellino and the Panthers, and it's now benefiting him at the high school level as they've turned the fortunes around there in Gibson Island.
And the stability. He's been there now, for a while. He's starting to show that he is, going to stay around as the head coach and build a program the right way, and they're getting some pretty good athletes. And they could have the winningest season in school history. You think about that. Chesapeake's been around a long time, and they could have more victories in football than they've had in any previous season. That is really saying something. Be a huge accomplishment to make the playoffs for the Cougars.
Kind of strange to see Arundel on the outside looking in at the playoffs. We beat South River 55-20. Deontay Thompson throwing for 2 touchdowns, 1 to Andrew Cassard in that game. But here's Arundel, more than likely going to finish at 7-3. But it's just one of those years where 7-3 is not going to be good enough in what has always been a very tough 4A East region.
And I know Chuck Markowitz is thinking to himself, because they're suddenly playing really good football here toward the end. I think they're hitting their stride. Deontay Thompson has grown up as a quarterback. They lost the key games. They couldn't. The Annapolis game was the key for them. You could understand they lost Old Mill and Broadneck, but the Annapolis one was the one that, and that shows Annapolis changed the hierarchy of the high schools in Anne Arundel County this year.
Yeah, and Arundel had a lead in that game too, a big lead in that game, and allowed Annapolis to come back. Old Mill, no problems with Meade, 49-6. Pete Boone with 141 and 4 scores in that one. North County picks up its 3rd win of the season as they beat Northeast 33-0.
He's quietly done a decent job. He really has. I mean, he's come in, got hired really late. I mean, not until the summertime, because they also didn't have an athletic director. Pete Alvanos, former Annapolis High product, who was once the head coach of Franklin and Marshall football back in the day. Pete Alvanos didn't get hired until the summertime, and then he had to hire a football coach. So he came in late and has done a pretty good job. And I think that's a positive season for North County to get a couple wins.
Well, at least it's a step in the right direction. That's all you're hoping for. Saturday, Broadneck, no problem with Severna Park winning 24-7. Chris Watts, 144 yards on 8 carries, including a 75-yard touchdown run in that contest for the Bruins. Private school-wise, Delaware Valley Charter, no match for Spalding. Josh Chase had 4 touchdowns for the Cavaliers in that one. And, of course,
Severn River rivalry.
And you being a St. Mary's grad, Bill. Yep. Severn wins it 13-6. Mason Pung with 2 touchdown passes for the winners. And yet another Perrotin, Jacob Perrotin,
big play.
With a big play on the defensive side to thwart a St. Mary's drive deep in Severn territory. Perrotins have certainly played good football at Severn, but for the first time since 2006, Severn walks away with a victory in that series.
And you could tell from reading the quotes from the players in the paper how excited they were. I mean, this is really huge for Chris Kirchenreiter and his kids. 8 straight years losing to your rivalry. They know what it's like for Army, and they finally snapped that streak. And St. Mary's has, frankly, finished the season pretty poorly. They got blown out by Archbishop Curley. They got blown out by John Carroll. And then you lose to your arch rival, who, frankly, you were supposed to beat. On paper, St. Mary's was the favorite team there. So not a very strong finish for the Saints, but it's a great win for Severn. You got to feel good for those kids. And Coach Chris Kirchenreiter, a great win.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
And a big game, it's interesting. I didn't know that private schools are now playing 11 football games, by the way. Both Mount St. Joseph and Spalding have already played 10 games, and they're playing each other this weekend in a little showdown, which means a lot to recruiting when you got Rich Holzer, former me coach up at Mount St. Joseph, Kyle Schmidt at Spalding. They're going for a lot of the same kids in this general area. Pasadena, Glen Burnie, border areas there. This is a huge game for these 2 schools, although both of them are out of the race for the MIAA conference.
I was going to say, which one costs less to go to? That one probably has the advantage when it comes down to private school football. When we come back, we will talk about the colleges. One of the biggest regular season games in Navy history coming up this weekend. And Maryland just finishing out the string in the Big Ten. We'll talk about that when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Bill and I are going to be in Memphis, Tennessee this weekend. And Bill, probably the biggest regular season game for Navy, not named Notre Dame, Army, or Air Force, since 1984 when the Mids beat South Carolina, the #2 team in the country, as they travel to Memphis this week, take on the undefeated Tigers. Mids undefeated in the American Athletic Conference as well. On paper, boy, does this look like a tremendous, tremendous football game. Saturday, 7 o'clock on ESPN2.
Well, and this is part of the fun of a conference, with Navy joining a conference. This is the kind of games you wanted to play. Big, important conference games with a lot of national meaning for both of these schools. Obviously, Navy upsets Memphis. It would be the first time they'd beaten a top 15 program since they beat South Carolina, what was it, 84? Mm-hmm. And they haven't beaten a ranked opponent, period, since 2009.
Haven't won a ranked opponent versus a ranked opponent on the road since they beat Penn State in 74.
Right.
So.
And this team is legit, Memphis. They beat Ole Miss. That's their signature victory so far. Ole Miss is in the hunt for the West Division Championship of the Southeastern Conference. And
yeah, they only won at Alabama. That's
right.
all.
They're legit. How Alabama is fourth in the first playoff pairings with a loss to Ole Miss is not beyond me, but that's another story. But huge game. Paxton Lynch is the big story for Memphis. 6'7", 245-pound quarterback who most general managers in the NFL believe he is the best quarterback available in the collegiate ranks. Going to be a great test for the Navy defense, the Navy secondary. But this is probably the best defense you and I have seen out of Navy in quite some time.
I would think so, and based on points allowed. And as I was talking with some people in Memphis this week, I think, a few years ago when Navy upset Notre Dame out at Notre Dame, they're playing with a guy like Ram Vela at outside linebacker who's 5'9".
Yeah.
Now you look at the outside linebacker depth chart, and this is because of Navy's success. Every one of those guys is 6'4".
Yep,
and
good
you're
size.
talking about a great athlete out there at 6'4", 205, 210 now that's manning that position. And you see when you have success, it allows you to recruit better kids. And we've talked about this before, but the state of Tennessee has produced some ridiculous talent for Navy. Ashley Ingram's gone into that state and gone into living rooms and just gotten kids to come there. What a game this is going to be for them to be able to go back to their home state and play in such a meaningful football game, irregardless of the fact that if Keenan Reynolds scores one touchdown, he's the all-time leading touchdown scorer on the ground in the history of college football.
All right, which is an amazing accomplishment. But Keenan Reynolds, Joey Gaston, the left tackle. I mean, we could go on and on. There's a lot of talent from Tennessee playing for Navy. Many of these guys are starters. Others are on the depth chart. The volunteer state has been good to the Mids, and you said it, Ashley Ingram's the guy. He first went in there and got Jabari Tawani shortly after being hired at Navy, and that began a pipeline that has continued to this day. And a lot of these players are some of the best players Navy's had in the recent history, Keenan Reynolds being at the top of the list. But it's going to be a fun game under the lights at the renowned Liberty Bowl. This is going to be a special game. It's going to be on national TV. This is a game that's getting national attention. This is one of the top games of the weekend in all of college football.
Yeah, and you'll be able to listen to it locally on 1090 WBAL, 1430 WNAV in Annapolis, as well as we'll have the call from the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee. From Maryland, Wisconsin comes a calling. Wisconsin playing some of its best football of the season right now. Terps mauled by Iowa last week. Played pretty sound game for a while there, but just not enough pieces to go up against the undefeated Hawkeyes who pulled away for a 31-15 win. And what more can you say about Will Likely? He seems to do at least one thing every week that reinforces that he's going to be a very good pro, not only as a corner, but in the return game as well.
Right, well, and they're actually starting to use him on offense now.
Why not? He's one of your best playmakers.
Right, most dynamic player they have on the field with the ball in his hands, and so they used him on offense, which I think is a really good move by Mike Loxley. But Maryland's they're overmatched in this league. The running game, Iowa just smash mouth. Mm-hmm. I mean, just pounded them. And I'm sure Wisconsin's going to try to do the same thing. It's homecoming in College Park. Be interesting to see what kind of fan support they get, because the season's pretty much lost at this point. The 2-7 record. And, it's interesting. I now write for both the Baltimore Sun and the Capitol. This week, something that's never happened before, Navy football is on the front page of the Baltimore Sun. Maryland football stories were either relegated to inside, and one day the story didn't even run. Daniel Gallen is out there every day doing a story for the Baltimore Sun, but it's just interesting that that things have changed. Navy is the exciting program that is locally deserves more attention at this time.
It's strange to see, no doubt, but when you pull the plug on your coach in the middle of the season, I don't think anything good comes from that.
No.
I don't think anything good is coming from this, especially with still a couple of good foes left for Maryland on the schedule. Everybody should just fast forward to the Rutgers game. It'll be their last chance to get a victory at the end of the season. It'll be a competitive game. And then let's see where Maryland goes. The problem for Maryland is good jobs keep opening up. Now Virginia Tech is open.
Right.
So that's a great job. That somebody is likely going to be in the pecking order ahead of Maryland as well now.
People are talking about Justin Fuente at Memphis is probably the hottest coach on the market.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, Memphis is going to make every effort to keep him. Their football fortunes are higher than they've ever been, and they would be foolish not to throw the house at Justin Fuente.
The question is how much house do they have to throw, unless they can get, of course, Mr. FedEx there in Memphis to cough up some
they may
cash
have
for
to.
him.
Well, somebody's going to come in and offer him $2-3 million.
Oh, I think Virginia Tech is going to be number one at the door.
Miami,
for Justin Fuente,
South Carolina. I mean, you name it. He's going to have his pick, and that Maryland is an afterthought. They already are out of the running for a guy like Justin Fuente.
And probably Tom Herman now of Houston as
I
well.
would think so as well. Yep.
So it's going to be interesting to see what's left. Hey, Matt Rule at Temple still looking pretty good out there. If I'm a Maryland Terrapin fan, he's a guy that's been able to recruit kids from this area throughout. And you got to have somebody that can try and keep these kids in state. I mean, Maryland still loses its best kids in state to the Penn States and the other major powers of the world until Maryland secures their own border, which I'm not sure if it's ever going to happen, to be honest with you. I really don't.
And I can tell you this, looking at the USA Today coaching salaries, Matt Rule's not making anything.
No.
It won't be hard to throw some money at him that's going to be beyond what Temple has been able to afford. They just think they don't have the ability to pay their coach. That's probably He may be
the facility. I mean, they really. I mean, if you've ever been to Temple's campus, it's an urban campus. They don't have they just don't have any room to build a ton of facilities there. And I was happy to see them have such a turnout against Notre Dame.
Yeah, that was really nice.
It was really good to see. They played a terrific football game on Saturday at Lincoln Financial Field, but came up on the short end. When we come back, Bill was at the Ravens game. Maybe they ought to pay you to go to all of them. They won. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Justin Tucker, his right foot is pretty magical, and he did not miss when it mattered most for the Ravens this past week as they edged the Chargers 29-26. Both teams now sitting at 2-6 on the season. But, Bill, for the Ravens, hey, after all these close losses, finally a close game goes their way.
Right. It's been a rough season, and they really needed that one, frankly. It was like lifted a big weight off the shoulders of everyone involved, from John Harbaugh to the players. Just a nice win on a beautiful day in Baltimore at M&T Bank Stadium. It was a great day for football. Justin Tucker, 5 field goals. That's a good and bad news situation. It's great that you have a kicker that can finish for you, but you got to score touchdowns. They were down there in the red zone time after time and just stalled. Did not have anything to finish into scoring touchdowns. Joe Flacco has no weapons. Being there live in person and seeing receivers who just cannot get separation. They have one guy who knows how to get open. His name's Steve Smith Sr., and he is no longer available for the rest of the season due to a torn Achilles. That was just horrible to see. And now you're really down to a bunch of scrubs at wide receiver, frankly.
Yeah, they brought in the former Saint Joe Morgan this week. And, now that the test is for Mark Trestman and Joe Flacco to try and get those guys up to speed. The only good news is they have 2 weeks to do it with a bye week this week, and then, of course, the hapless Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right, I have to say, their schedule is starting to lighten up. They have more home games, first of all. They've had a brutal schedule to date. A lot of road games, West Coast trips. So that is the good news. There is a lot of home games, and a few of those home games are very winnable. So they may be able to fight themselves back into, relatively, decent shape.
Any chance to get to 500?
Right. I don't know about that. But if you could get close.
You get the Steelers here, you probably pitch the Bengals game.
Not going to beat the Bengals.
Bengals are good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yep. Although Pittsburgh had them and could have won that game. The Bengals were probably their lowest scoring game of the season by far, and Pittsburgh could
and
not
the
finish.
Steelers lost Le'Veon Bell this week too.
That's huge.
To a new
Injuries are taking their toll in the NFL.
No doubt, no doubt. Big week on the injury front. Redskins this week, by the way, going to the New England Patriots.
Can they win that game, Pete? They're coming off a bye. They've had 2 weeks to get ready.
Deshaun Jackson is back. Culliver and Hall might play, but the Patriots would have to contribute to the Redskins winning.
I would think so. And you got to get a running game going. The problem with the Redskins have not been able to run the ball. All of a sudden, when early in the year it looked like the running tackle was going to be fantastic with the dual tandem of Alfred Morris and Matt Jones.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, they can't run the ball.
It must be the offensive line.
Can't get any drive, though they've been pass blocking fairly well here of late. It's just kind of a strange anomaly about the Redskins, who, of course, played well in their last outing with Kirk Cousins in the second half of that Tampa Bay game. By the way, in addition to the Anne Arundel County football slate we told you about, as always, the big game, almost kind of like a war on the shore of its own, Kent Island and Queen Anne's.
Yeah, this is the big
friend
showdown.
Damian Ferragamo now coaching at Kent Island. You've got 8-1 versus 7-2 with a playoff seeding implication on the line for those two. And that's always a fun game, and I've said it all along. Ever since the Chesapeake Bay Piranhas, who are where Kent Island is, and UQA, where Queen Anne's is, ever since they brought their football product in the early 2000s into the AAYFA to play, their high schools have dominated.
Right. Well, and Queen Anne's has been beating Kent Island the last few years. That's what a lot of our guys at the Capitol are picking Queen Anne's just because that's been the trend lately. And huge game for Damian Ferragamo in his first year at Kent Island. Got to beat the rival.
Well, he knows about playing rivalry games from his time at Old Mill. So he's been there in that spot before, and should be a good one coming up this week. That'll do it for this edition. We remind you, coming up next week, next Saturday, Bill and I will be at Chesapeake High School for the Anne Arundel County Youth Football Championships, as we'll bring you in touch with some of the sights and sounds of Championship Day at Chesapeake. Northeast unavailable this year because of the MPSSAA State Soccer semifinals. So we'll just go right down Mountain Road a little bit further and head down to Chesapeake for the Championship Day next Saturday. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next week right here on the Gridiron Review.